Hi, welcome to Pyrography Made Easy. I'm Brenda. In this tutorial episode, I am going to explain how to create the Happy Valentine's Day sign that I did. Before we get going, there's something that I want to mention. Even if this artwork is not something that you're interested in, I view it kind of like mandalas. It may not appeal to you either, but there may be some element or texture in there that you can use in another project. So anytime you see mandalas or artwork like this where there's multiple pieces, just try to keep that in mind. The other thing I want to mention is that there is a written version of this tutorial on my website, Pyrography Made Easy, and that tutorial has the free pattern that you can use. Well, let's get started. Foliage. Begin by burning in the background foliage to a dark tan color. I am using Colwood's C Writer pen tip for this. With the leaves, burn around them and then fill them in using whatever burn stroke you want. I am basically scribbling and using a little circular motion. As you can see, the color does not need to be uniform. Burn in the curving lines on the flower bud, then burn around the edges of the bud, and afterwards fill it in. Once again, I am pretty much scribbling to fill the bud with color. You can make these as dark or as light as you want. As I burned in the foliage, the one thing I kept in mind is that the overall foliage is small. No one's going to look at it that closely. So I didn't want to spend a lot of time on the foliage. I wanted to keep the foliage simple because the foliage is an accent. When I designed this artwork, the main function of the foliage was to fill in some of the empty space on the board. That said, make it yours. You can make this darker if you prefer. You could add more flowers. You can add some actual roses or other flowers. It's completely up to you what you want to do. You can even add some color to this. Get creative, have fun with it. You may have noticed that I don't always burn directly over the pencil lines. When I'm burning the curved lines, I let my hand dictate the flow and curve of the line. After the lines are burned in, I'll rub over the area with a pencil eraser to remove any graphite. I have sped up the video a lot, especially when I'm burning the lines. There isn't any special technique needed for that. The only thing that I will mention is that you should use a light hand pressure when burning. This will allow the pen tip to glide over the surface of the wood easier. A light hand pressure will also help maintain a more consistent heat output. Using a light hand pressure is a good thing to do regardless of the pen tip that you are using. Use a pencil eraser to remove any residual graphite. Lettering. Use a white charcoal pencil to draw in the highlights. I am using the Conte brand, but Generals also works just fine. Do not use a colored pencil. Colored pencils contain waxes and oils, and those will melt and char under the heat of the pen tip. Now this is an optional step, so you can skip it completely if you don't want to do it. Here's how the letter H looked after I was done applying charcoal. Next, use a shader of your choice and burn darkly along the outer edges of the letters. I am using Colwood's J shader. As you burn, there are 3 things to keep in mind. 1. Use a light hand pressure. A light hand pressure allows the pen tip to glide over the wood easier and you get more consistent burn results. 2. Keep your pen tip in optimal position. This means that the end of the pen tip is on the edge of the letter. The body of the pen tip is angled over the body of the letter. Burning in this position will help keep the edges of the letter crisp and clean. Make sure to rotate the board as needed to keep the pen tip in optimal position as you're burning. 3. Don't burn at a high heat. The higher the heat is, the more likely you are to get overburn. Plus, higher heats require you to work faster, and that makes it harder to control the results. Instead, keep the heat set just to the point where you can get a dark result without having to rush or produce overburn. Burn over the thin areas on the letter. Make the color a couple of shades lighter than the edges of the letter. If needed, turn the heat down on your burner since we don't need a really dark burn result. Given the size or the width of the small areas on the letters, it might be easier to use a writer pen tip to burn them in. With this medium width section of the letter, fill in the area to a brown color. Make the color several shades lighter than the edges. It should be a noticeable color difference. Make sure to avoid burning over the white charcoal. The white charcoal will resist the heat of the pen tip, but it won't block it completely, so that's why we need to avoid burning over it. The charcoal's purpose is to mark the area we don't want to burn over. Burn in the thicker width sections on the letter. Make sure to avoid the white charcoal. Make sure the color is several shades lighter than the edges. And do your best to create gradient shading. This means that the color gets gradually lighter as you approach the white charcoal. I am using either circular motion or uniform strokes as my burn method, but you can use any burn method that you prefer. I am only going to explain how to burn in the first letter. You can then apply the information to the remaining letters. This is the same basic thing I did with the background foliage. It is also what I will be doing with the hearts. Otherwise, this tutorial would be excessively repetitive and boringly long. I am using a micro writer to darkly burn a small area on the letter where it goes under another section of the letter. I am doing this to create a slight shadow and increase the contrast between the two sections. The inset photo shows the new and old version of Colwood's micro writer pen tip. I got this far with the artwork and decided I did not like the highlights on the letters. They were too bright and made it harder to see the letters. They just didn't stand out enough from the background. To fix this, I burned over the highlights until they were in the light to medium brown color range. I used uniform strokes as my main burn method for this, but I also used some circular motion. Not much, though. As I finish up the last of the lettering, you can see how they stand out better from the background with the highlights burned over. Hearts. Use a shader of your choice and burn darkly along the outer edges of the hearts. Make sure to keep your pen tip in optimal position as you work. Rotate the board as needed to keep your pen tip in optimal position as you're burning around the edges. This is the same basic process that we used on the lettering. Now burn pull-away strokes along the edges of the hearts. Start the stroke in the dark border we just burned and pull the pen tip towards the center of the heart. Because the border is so dark, we don't have to go right to the very edge of the heart. If it is helpful, draw a small dot or circle in the center of your heart with a pencil so that you know where to angle your burn strokes towards. The faster you move your hand, the quicker the color will fade. Make sure to slightly overlap your burn strokes. This will help prevent individual burn strokes from being visible. It is up to you how far you want to extend the color into the heart. If you want to extend the color further than a single burn stroke produces, then just reburn over the area. The more you reburn, the darker the overall color will be, but also the further the color will extend towards the center of the heart. You can use any shader that you want for this step. A larger shader will make the burning process go faster. Keep in mind that the higher the heat is set, the faster you will need to move your hand to get gradient shading. To get better results, I highly recommend using a light hand pressure. This allows the pen tip to glide over the surface of the wood and keeps the heat output more consistent. Also, it is easier to control the speed and pressure of your burn strokes if you pull the pen tip down towards yourself versus pushing it up and away or pulling it to the side. While it is possible to burn pull-away strokes in these directions, it is much easier if you just pull the pen tip down towards yourself. Rotate the board as needed so that you are pulling the pen tip down towards yourself. Something I try to stress in my videos is the fact that I am just explaining how I created the artwork. You need to sift through the information and incorporate the aspects that work best for you. Discovering what works best for you is going to take practice and experimenting. The little crescents on the hearts were supposed to be very reflective highlights. I'm burning darkly along the upper edge of the crescents and I'm giving them clearly defined edges. To do this, I burn along the edge of the crescent with my pen tip in optimal position, and then I fill in the rest of the area using circular motion. It just needs to be dark so you can use any burn stroke you want. Todd never liked the crescents, and I'm not sure what I think of them. They did not turn out as I had envisioned. If you don't like them, leave them out and just fill the area with pull-away strokes. Now we need to fill the center of the hearts with uniform color. I am using uniform strokes for this. Make sure your burner is set to get a light to medium tan burn result. Then pull the pen tip down towards yourself. Use a light hand pressure and keep your hand speed constant. Also, slightly overlap your burn strokes to hide individual burn strokes from forming. The board I am burning on has a horizontal grain on it, so that means the grain is running left to right. When I burn vertically, up and down, I end up burning across the grain, and I'm having some troubles keeping the color uniform. To fix this problem, I rotated the board so that now I am burning with the grain. Burning with the grain makes it much easier to produce nice, even, and smooth-looking color. One of the keys to smooth color is to pull the pen tip down towards yourself. I burned a couple of times pushing the pen tip up and away. This produced a small streak that is slightly darker than the adjacent color. I have an arrow pointing to the spot. So let's recap the tips for producing nice smooth color using uniform strokes. 1. Pull the pen tip down towards yourself. 2. Move your hand at a constant and steady speed. 3. Use a light hand pressure. 4. Slightly overlap your burn strokes. And 5. If possible, burn with the wood grain. I did this artwork back in 2018, so I was still trying to master the techniques of uniform strokes. As for burning with the wood grain, some types of wood it really makes a difference with, and others it isn't that noticeable. And that is probably due to the fact that some types of wood have more grain lines than others, just like some woods have grain lines that are darker and more noticeable. These characteristics can vary even between trees of the same species. One type of wood that I almost always have problems with is plywood. It doesn't seem to matter what type of plywood. I have burned on birch, Baltic, and maple. I've burned on both grade A and grade B plywood. I can always tell when I'm burning across the grain because the pen tip tends to skip and catch. it is harder to get even color. Because of this, I always try to burn with the grain, especially if I need to create smooth, uniform color on plywood. After I filled the hearts with color, I burned a wide, dark, and fairly crisp line along the bottom edge of the crescents. Then I extended the color into the heart, allowing it to fade and blend in with the rest of the heart. I primarily used circular motion and some uniform strokes as my burn methods for this. Here's how the hearts looked after I was done. The crescent shapes do not look like reflected light. So I sanded over the area to remove a lot of color from the hearts adjacent to the crescents. Then I reburned that area, making the highlights narrower and gave them a softer edge along the bottom. It looks better, but it's not awesome. And as I said before, you can easily leave them out. I want to mention that you need to take your time with the hearts. This medium heart took me 45 minutes to do, and that doesn't count the time fixing mistakes. The large heart took me closer to 60 minutes. As I reburn over the area around the highlight, I am using circular motion as my main burn method. I also use some uniform strokes. Since I am trying to fix a mistake and reburn the area so that the color blends in, and hopefully you can't tell that I had to sand and reburn, I find it helpful to rotate the board and work on it in a different direction. This can be helpful to spot problems, areas that need a little bit more color, or a little rough patch that I need to carefully burn around so it blends in better. Here's how the hearts looked before and after I fixed the highlights. Ribbon. Use a skew pin tip and burn the long lines on the ribbon. I am using Colwood's MR pin tip. As I work, I have my hand and wrist locked. I am moving my arm as one unit. Start the burn stroke at the top of a line and slowly pull your arm back towards your body. Don't flex or move your fingers. I have since learned a better way to create straight lines, and I will put a link to that video in the description below. Switch to the shader of your choice and burn in the outer border on the ribbon. You can make it any color you want. I chose to burn it to a similar color as the foliage. To me, the ribbon is an accent and a space filler, so I wanted a more subdued coloring on it. As you work, make sure you keep your pin tip in optimal position when burning along the edges of the border. Use a light hand pressure when burning. Also, don't try to burn along the bottom edge of the border. With the board in this position, your pin tip would not be in optimal position to burn along the bottom edge. You'd be more likely to burn past it. So instead, rotate the board and then burn along the bottom edge of the ribbon border. Also, reburn over the border to darken it slightly and even out the color. Here's the pattern for the lacy part of the ribbon. I've coated the back of the printout with graphite. Then I align one edge with the inner edge of the ribbon. Then I traced over it to transfer the design onto the board. Once the pattern is transferred, use a writer pin tip and burn over the trace lines using a very heavy hand pressure. We are creating embossed lines. Make sure the heat on your burner is set to a very low temperature. We don't want to add color. Instead, we just want to create deep grooves that are embedded into the surface of the wood. I did try using an embossing tool to both transfer and create the deeply grooved lines on a piece of test wood that was the same type I was burning on. I wasn't able to press hard enough through the paper to create a deep enough line that when you burned over it, it was visible. If you don't want to use your writer pen tip as the embossing tool, then try an embossing tool after you've transferred the design. Here's how my test board looked after I was done. Most of the lines are not very visible. Now we just need to burn over the lace. Use the shader of your choice for this. I am using circular motion as my main burn method. I'm burning the lace to a tan color. Make sure you use a light hand pressure when burning. A heavy hand pressure can remove or greatly reduce the embossed lines. You can get creative with the lace. For example, you can burn each design individually. Make the center of each design a dark tan color or maybe even light brown. Burn the main part of the design to a medium tan color and leave the curving border unburned. I chose to keep things simple, so I didn't burn the designs individually. Instead, I burned circular motion over everything. When I was working along the outer edges of the lace, I would occasionally use uniform strokes just to help ensure I didn't burn past the edges of the lace. Here's how the lace looked once I was done. And here is a close-up of the lace. I didn't like how noticeable the graphite was down in the bottom of the lines, so what I did was use the tip of a sharp knife and scraped it away. Here's the before and after once I was done doing that. And here's how the board looked once I was done. Well, that's it for this episode. I hope you found the information helpful. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I do have a written version of this tutorial available on my website, Pyrography Made Easy, and I will put a link to that blog in the description below. Well, thank you so much for watching my video, and I will see you next week.